welcome to Prosper Africa's Roundtable on investing in Africa's women tech founders and portfolio managers. I'm Nina Prieur. I'm the Senior Communications Advisor for the US government's Prosper Africa initiative, and I'm going to be serving as MC throughout today's conversation. I won't talk long, but I just want to make sure you all know that we have a full and exciting program lined up, consisting of 2 panels. The first featuring some really fantastic women tech founders whose companies are featured in the new Prosper Africa virtual deal room, which connects a curated group of African businesses raising capital with US investors seeking new opportunities. And the second panel featuring investors engaged in gender lens investing across the African continent. We're going to be kicking off each panel with keynote remarks from some of our distinguished guests, and we're looking forward to a lively conversation with all of you and would invite you to please submit questions and comments in the Q&A throughout our conversation. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Anne Womer, who is Acting Chief Operating Officer for Prosper Africa. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Nina. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to today's event featuring an amazing group of women tech founders whose businesses are actively raising capital through Prosper Africa's new virtual deal room. Prosper Africa is a US government initiative that serves as a one-stop shop for US and African businesses and investors to access market intelligence, deal support, financing, and solutions to strengthen business climates. We know businesses don't invest in what they can't see. Through events like this one, Prosper Africa is committed to highlighting emerging opportunities across the African continent and creating a forum for businesses and investors to connect with one another and also to connect with your champions across the US government. Today, we look forward to sharing more information about the tools and resources the US government offers businesses and investors, and also to engaging with leading fund managers about the importance of strengthening gender lens investing across Africa. Before we kick off those discussions, I am happy to turn the floor to our keynote speaker, Jessica Davis-Ba, Senior Coordinator and Special Advisor for Africa for the Office of the Vice President. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne, and good morning, and thank you for this honor to join you in this innovative setting. And while innovation and government may not be the first 2 words that you would associate with one another, today we are doing just that. Today, we are doing things differently. We are building back better. Our forum is innovative in its approach to bring US government tools to focus on investing in women tech founders in Africa. And President Biden and Vice President Harris have placed technology and innovation at the heart of all US government strategies to drive our nation's progress. Our progress in communities across the United States is linked to progress in communities across Africa. Our world is interconnected, and our world is interdependent. So we must create opportunity for all people, and small businesses are key in our collective efforts to rebuild after this pandemic has destroyed so much. This afternoon, Washington time, Vice President Harris will announce new support to provide access to capital for small businesses. And with her roots in California, the world's leading hub for innovation, the Vice President is a champion for technology. She is a champion for women. So this morning, we are in lockstep with Vice President Harris. We are bringing together resources and tools across the US government to invest in women. We are participating in this event from across the globe to ensure women have the capital they need to expand their businesses, to create jobs, and to drive innovation. Today, we will hear from an inspiring group of women tech leaders. We will learn about how their businesses are solving the greatest challenges on the continent and in our world. Each of the founders we will hear from today leads a company that is featured on the new Prosper Africa virtual deal room. And Prosper Africa is a US government initiative to increase trade and investment between the United States and Africa. This innovative initiative brings together the full suite of US government trade and investment support services to provide US and African businesses and investors with market insights, deal support, and financing opportunities. And since Prosper Africa launched in June 2019, the US government has helped close to 500 deals across 44 African countries. And the estimated total value of these deals closed is $47 billion in new exports and investments. So today, we build on this positive momentum. And together, we must be intentional in our approach to match opportunity and investment. And the Prosper Africa Deal Room is an exciting new tool in the larger Prosper Africa toolkit to do just that. Through the Deal Room, the US government is connecting US investors with opportunities curated by on-the-ground experts. And these experts also provide African businesses with advisory support to most effectively package and promote these opportunities. Prosper Africa is a US government innovation. Right after college, about 30 years ago now, one of my first jobs was actually to offer a handbook on doing business in Africa to US companies to encourage them to invest on the continent. We printed a new edition annually, and I was responsible for keeping that information current one time a year. We've come a long way since then. Now we have access to instantaneous updates and information, yet we face some of the same challenges that we did 30 years ago. US investors recognize the vast opportunities in Africa and they want to invest more in the region, but they often struggle to find opportunities at the stage in which they can invest. We recognize the problem and we developed a solution. The Prosper Africa Virtual Deal Room is a marketplace tool to help overcome this barrier to US investment in Africa. The Virtual Deal Room offers a curated group of investment opportunities in Africa that have been screened to ensure US investors have the information they need to make sound investment decisions. And more than 300 businesses and investors have already registered for the Deal Room. And the Prosper Africa Deal Room can include deals across all sectors, and the majority of opportunities use digital technologies to solve pressing problems or address systemic gaps in African markets. And the leaders you will hear from today recognized the power of this platform. These innovative women will offer their experience so we can all learn to become allies and resources to match opportunity with investment. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the fragility of healthcare systems and informal employment. And Vice President Harris is laser focused on health equity and global health. And many of the companies featured today address these issues head on. For example, Neopenda and LifeBank are helping to solve the myriad of problems limiting access to critical care in Africa. And today, there are more opportunities than ever to invest in women-led companies. We are building back better. The business leaders joining us are models to emulate, using technology to address market gaps and overcome barriers. As African women increasingly step into the formal workforce, they are seizing the opportunity to lead bold new business ventures, capture value, and improve value chains. For example, Zumi is revolutionizing the secondhand apparel market in Kenya, encouraging women business owners to expand their business with access to financing, inventory, and supply chain support. Women founders are supporting other women, building and empowering communities. For example, Bliss has created, supported, and empowered mothers and mothers-to-be in Nigeria and Kenya through a digital platform of advice, services, and trusted products. And to increase trade and investment most effectively, we must prioritize gender lens investing. And we will all learn more about this today. Gender lens investing is not just about gender equity for the sake of social good, but it is about understanding the true economic value of women-led businesses. We must invest in women today and for the future, our future, a more equitable world. In 2019 and 2020, women CEOs accounted for just 4% and 2% respectively of capital raised by African startups. But so far, in 2021, female founders have received 14% of venture capital funds raised this year to date. We have made progress, but we still have very far to go. We must build on this progress to achieve parity, equity, for the good of our communities and our global economy. To achieve true economic growth, we must address the unique challenges faced by women-led businesses. We must create tools and resources to unlock the multi-trillion-dollar opportunity that African women-owned businesses represent. We must all become champions for investing in women. This forum and the Prosper Africa Deal Room are an excellent start. What we do after today will make all the difference. So let us work together to create opportunity. Let us all become champions for women and for innovation. Investing in women is an investment in our shared future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I can't begin to tell you what an honor it is to have you here with us today. And I know you are as eager as I am to jump into our first discussion, our panel of women tech founders. So I'm going to turn it over to Marlynie Moodley, who's the head of communications for the Cross Boundary Group, which provides transaction advisory services in support of Prosper Africa and the Prosper Africa Virtual Deal Room. Over to you, Marlynie.
Thank you so much, Nina. Cross Boundary is pleased to be supporting Prosper Africa as they highlight opportunities for investors to support women tech founders and fund managers across Africa. If you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to register on the Prosper Africa Virtual Deal Room. You'll see the link posted on the chat soon. The deal team is continuously adding new transactions to the Prosper Africa Virtual Deal Room, and Cross Boundary is proud to be the implementing partner with Prosper Africa on this important initiative. Today, we are going to focus on female tech founders and entrepreneurs, and we're going to showcase 4 of the companies that are featured on the Virtual Deal Room. As already mentioned, the Virtual Deal Room really encompasses many sectors from all across the continent. Registered users can search transactions by deal size, by deal type, by sector, by country, so you can really target what you're looking for in line with your investment criteria. Once you access the site and find transactions you're keen on, you can register your interest in those transactions, and a member of the Prosper Africa team will be in touch with you to understand your investment criteria and to put you in touch directly with the entrepreneurs and the companies themselves. Moving on to our panel today, I'd like to get started by highlighting some numbers of recent studies that puts into perspective the funding disparity that exists for female founders, even as they continue to face endemic barriers in accessing capital to start and grow their businesses. And then to highlight some really interesting numbers that make a case for change. According to the IFC, from 2012 to 2017, only $30 million of investment went to female founders in Africa. Now, to put that number into context, in 2019 alone, $130 billion of venture capital was invested in entrepreneurs in the US. This means that over a 5-year span, female founders in Africa only received 0.02% of what is invested in US venture in just 1 year. Data collected by the World Bank in 10 African countries shows male-owned enterprises have 6 times more capital than female-owned enterprises. Now, this huge capital gap is not stopping the rise of female entrepreneurs, but it does slow them and makes their efforts a whole lot more challenging. Now, even with this funding disparity, there's some really interesting numbers that make a good case for investing in female-founded companies. A 2019 analysis by BCG shows that if women and men participated equally as entrepreneurs, global GDP could rise by approximately 3 to 6%, boosting the global economy by $2.5 to $5 trillion. According to another study by BCG, Why Women-Owned Startups Are a Better Bet, they found that for every dollar of funding, women-owned startups generated 78 cents, whereas male-founded startups generated only 31 cents. Over a 5-year period, they found that startups founded and co-founded by women actually performed better over time, generating a 10% higher cumulative revenue, which is $730,000 for women compared to $662,000 for men. So yet another good financial incentive to close the gender funding disparity. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our amazing lineup of panelists, all of whom are currently featured on the Prosper Africa Deal Room. First up, I've got Temie Giwa-Tubosun. Temie is the founder and CEO of Life Bank and is an international public management professional with over 10 years experience in health management. She's been recognized for work as an innovator by the BBC, the World Economic Forum, and Forbes. Welcome, Temie. So you've had a long career in public health prior to taking the entrepreneurial road. What inspired you to start Life Bank?
Thank you so much. That's a very great question. So very simple, the story of Life Bank began in a hospital. And this hospital happened to be in Minnesota, where I grew up. I was delivering my first baby and I was in trouble. But I was very lucky to have access to excellent healthcare with great doctors who had all the commodities they needed to save my life. And I always go back to that moment in the hospital, wondering whether I was going to get to meet my son. A few years back, I moved back to Nigeria to do this work. And what I wanted to do is to ensure that hospitals across Africa had access to the commodities to save their patients. We started with blood. And in Africa, the highest cause of maternal death in the world, particularly in Africa, is postpartum hemorrhage, a condition that occurs immediately after birth that leads to bleeding of the woman and often leads to death within a very short amount of time. It is a large problem, a catastrophic problem, and a problem that is very entrenched. We felt that we could build a supply chain system that distributes blood and moves blood from the blood bank to the hospital where the patients desperately needed it. We started our little company in Nigeria 6 years ago and built and proved the model for 2 years, just in Lagos. Once we felt that we had built something that mattered and we had revenue, we expanded to another city in Nigeria called Abuja. By 2018, we refined the model further, and by 2019, we felt like we had built a business that could scale. The beginning of 2020 started, and we had the pandemic. We did not let the pandemic stop us because we felt that the pandemic actually showed why it is so critical to do the work that we do. We expanded during the pandemic, expanded to the rest of the country in Nigeria and have presence across 8 cities and 8 states in Nigeria. Within the pandemic, we were able to use our skills to really give back to our community. We were able to build the very first testing center for Life Bank for Nigeria, a drive-through and walk-through testing center for COVID-19. We distributed thousands of cylinders of oxygen to hospitals that needed it. And incidentally, we had actually started our work into medical oxygen a few months before the pandemic. But we were able to accelerate and expand access to this critical supply, which the lack of this supply in hospitals across Africa, particularly Nigeria, caused about 50,000 people to lose their lives. So the impact is immense. Since then, we've grown to the rest of Africa. We've expanded and started operating in Kenya, and we've started a new country in Africa as well. Our model is very simple. We charge about $8 for every unit we distribute to the hospital. And the next phase of our growth is to expand access to even more hospitals. Since we launched, we've served about 1,000 hospitals, moving critical supplies like blood and oxygen and vaccines and all the important commodities needed to save patients' life in hospitals. Our impact is immense. And for us, our impact is not theoretical. We actually know the name of everybody we've saved. And we keep their first name very close to our heart. If you enter our office, you see the name of everybody we've saved. So we're a business that has proven that it can scale and scale to multiple countries with multiple use cases, with multiple products. And we've also scaled our impact in tangible, countable ways. We call ourselves, the future of Life Bank is expanding further into our value chain, not just waiting around distribution, but actually producing, delivering precision medicine by testing and creating blood components, making blood safer by screening blood in an agile and efficient way, and also creating a system that can scale medical oxygen production across Africa. We call ourselves the business of saving lives, and we believe deeply in the work that we do. Thank you. I think you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, I was. Moving on to Sona Shah, the CEO of Neopenda. Sona's path to global health entrepreneurship began when she earned a BS in chemical engineering from Georgia Tech and went on to work as an engineer in bioprocess research and development at Eli Lilly and Company. Welcome, Sona. So you began your career as a chemical engineer and have now charted a very different course. Tell us more about what brought this on.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I thank you all for having me first off, and good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're dialing in from. As Marls mentioned, I'm Sona, CEO and co-founder of Neopenda. I graduated with a BS in chemical engineering from Georgia Tech in 2011. And right after I graduated, I thought, why not do something a bit different before starting to work in pharma? So I went to Western Kenya and I was a teacher out there. Nothing to do with my engineering background, but absolutely loved it. I think all of us here share a shared passion for international development and the opportunities that are available on the African continent. But as I was a teacher, I was exposed to a number of beautiful and warm cultural aspects, but of course, a number of inequities that I just didn't have growing up. And that stuck with me and is certainly shaping what I'm doing today. But fast forward a little bit, started working in pharma, so drastically different world from my life in Kenya. And I was in bioprocess research and development, and really loved the engineering and the healthcare side of things, understanding product process development, understanding how healthcare can change and improve patient lives around the world. But I started thinking that my kids in Kenya may never see the medications that I was helping make. And that inequity ate away at me enough that I went back to graduate school at Columbia University to figure out some way to provide more equitable access to healthcare around the world. Didn't know that we'd end up with a startup. Here we are 6 years later. I started with my master's in biomedical engineering and met my now co-founder Tess in a biodesign course that we took together. Started doing some research on newborn mortality and why it's so much higher in low resource settings than here in the US. There's only so much research we could do from a lab in New York. So got some funding from the university and went out to Uganda and did a proper needs assessment. And we were just astonished by how few facilities had functioning medical devices in their hospitals. Rather, there was a separate room that nurses often call the equipment graveyard, and it's just where all the broken medical devices would go, because most devices aren't designed for the constraints that we see in 85% of the world's population. This is, power instability, wireless connectivity, dust, anything that makes traditional equipment fail. So we thought, why not use our engineering backgrounds to design appropriate technologies that meet most of the world's population? And the initial focus was on improving newborn health outcomes. And we would often find in the newborn wards that there were just so many critically ill patients and really not enough nurses to help care for them. So these nurses are just frantically running around trying to figure out which patients actually need their attention. And in the process, a lot of patients in distress would go unnoticed, and then they would die from preventable causes. So that's what led to the creation of our first product called NeoGuard. And I've got my lovely doll, the star of the show, Natasha, here with our device NeoGuard. So it's a vital signs monitor that measures 4 different parameters in a simple headband. And then the vitals wirelessly connect to a dashboard on a tablet that we provide. So a clinician can look at one screen and be able to tell what's going on with all her patients. So Temie, I've made a note to connect with you afterwards. I see a lot of opportunity for collaboration there.
Absolutely.
So before I move on to your first question, I just want to encourage you to, if you have any questions, please ask those via the questions platform, and we'll take it up after I'm through with all of the panelists. So Sona, COVID-19 forced businesses globally to pivot. What impact did COVID-19 have on Neopenda, and what opportunities emerged?
Yeah, we've got 10 hours, right? I've got a lot of thoughts on how things have shifted and pivots and all sorts of things. So at the beginning of COVID, I guess March, I don't know when we're calling beginning of COVID, but March 2020, we started thinking about, what is our strategy? Of course, as a small startup that was growing, we were initially thinking, we should extend our runway as much as possible, make sure we just don't run out of money. But then we quickly realized that, hey, we have a medical device that can actually help respond to the COVID pandemic. So we very quickly adapted NeoGuard from the neonatal version for use in adults, and that it opened up a lot of doors and opportunities for us to be able to both respond to the pandemic, but also to be able to accelerate a lot of our growth. So what that really meant was we calibrated the device for adults. We put an extender strap on our headband, and so now it's relevant for COVID patients. And then we started looking at how can we actually help. So vital signs monitoring is really important in the COVID pandemic for a variety of ways, but we can help identify suspected cases. We're not a diagnostic, but we can help identify, common symptoms that we see in COVID positive patients. We can help assess the severity of the patient. Do they need to be on a ventilator versus other oxygen treatments? And then is the treatment actually working? Are the patients improving? So it was a pretty quick adaptation for us, and that enabled us to adapt NeoGuard for even use here in the US. We started doing a remote patient monitoring trial in the US. We started doing a COVID-related trial at Jinja Hospital in Uganda. So, globally, we started seeing the impact that our system could have on both adult and neonatal patients alike. So from a purely product standpoint, I think there were a number of opportunities for a lot of healthcare companies to be able to adapt and really get into the fight, as opposed to taking a backseat on this one and letting the waves ride out. There were, of course, disruptions in supply chain. For example, as a hardware company, we saw delays, we saw increases in prices, we saw all sorts of disruptions related to that. Thankfully, we've got a network of a variety of partners and supporters that were able to help us navigate what those complexities were and really be able to deliver units to where they needed to be. So, if there are other startups that are listening out there, be agile and be resilient. There are ways to move mountains, and we can do it. You just have to get creative on how to.
Thank you so much. That was Sona Shah. Next up, we have Sabrina Dorman, who is the co-founder and CFO of Zumi. Zumi is revolutionizing Africa's apparel market through an e-commerce and embedded finance solution for retailers. Sabrina has been building e-commerce ventures in Africa for 7 years and continues to be inspired by the transformative effect e-commerce has on SMEs. Sabrina, it's one thing to bring e-commerce to formal markets, but Zumi is connecting the informal apparel market in Kenya with e-commerce solutions. Tell us about how you got started and have you achieved this?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Marls, and it's great to be on this panel with some other great founders. Yeah, I'm a founder of Zumi along with my co-founder, and we're both e-commerce people. So we actually met working for a company in Kenya during a Black Friday sale, and he was in the warehouse trying to organize all of the chaos, and I was on the commercial side creating all the chaos and trying to sell as many products as possible. So we bonded over that from the get-go. But the idea for Zumi came about from an experience that both of us had while shopping for clothing in Kenya. There's a market in Nairobi, which people in Kenya will know, called Toy Market. It's an open air market. There's many stalls. There's tarps on the ground with stuff to buy. I was shopping for shoes. I found a pair of ballet flats that I liked from Forever 21. They were a used pair of shoes. And I went to buy them and they were, $20. And I thought, that's almost the same price as I would buy these for brand new in New York City. So it got my mind spinning about, the supply chain here must be broken. Like, what's going on? And it turned out, many people have had the same experience as my co-founder had as well. And it kind of like flipped our curiosity switch in our brain, and we started digging into the why. So we started talking to retailers and understanding from them, where they buy their products, how much they buy them for. That led us to wholesale markets, and we sent runners into the wholesale markets to follow brokers around and figure out who's buying from who for how much, who are the importers. And as we started to map this supply chain, we came to find just how fragmented it is and how many unnecessary middlemen there are that are adding costs along the way. And as a result, retailers are really the ones who are getting a bad deal out of the whole thing. And they're not only getting, a bad deal on the price of goods and on the cost of logistics, but their business is informal and it's cash-based. So they have no track record to be evaluated for credit. And that means that they get stuck in these cycles of subsistence retail. So Zumi really came about as an answer to that problem. We are putting e-commerce infrastructure into the apparel supply chain, not only to bring cost efficiency and savings to these retailers, but also to bring them embedded financing so they can actually grow their business. And that's the relationship with the apparel retailer. That opportunity to grow the pie is really what we see as the big business opportunity here. So that's how we got started, the impetus for it. I think, as you say, what's really interesting is figuring out how do you take a very offline, informal, traditional market and bring it online and make it formal and apply e-commerce principles. And what we have found is that it's a step-by-step process, and it starts with relationships first and foremost. So without established brands and necessarily reliable logistics in these markets, we can't just put products on a platform and expect everything to work perfectly. Business is built on trust, it's built on personal relationships. So we've spent many hours learning about our customers, learning about our suppliers, and explaining to them why Zumi is here and how our platform and our financial services can actually translate into their increased income. And the other thing that I would say is that, when people think about shopping online and they think about e-commerce, they think about shopping behind a computer screen. But when you look at our customer base, they actually have a very diverse range of adoption of technology. So about half of our customers have a feature phone and about half have a smartphone. So we offer the opportunity for people to order in many different ways via text message or sales agent or call center, and we really meet them where they are and offer those multiple channels. But what's really interesting is then we also see like the dynamism of that customer base, and somebody who's using a feature phone today, in 6 months, they might have a smartphone, they might start using WhatsApp, they might start using a mobile application. And so really we see the transition from informal to formal market and offline to online as following that graduated step-by-step process as the customer base transitions and as we help them to do that.
Great, thank you so much, Sabrina. Our final panelist is Toyin Bajomo, who's the CEO of Baby Bliss in Nigeria, which is a fast-growing retail company in the mother and baby space. Based in Lagos, Toyin is helping startups and SMEs transform and grow their businesses using digital tools. Toyin, you left a career in banking in London for the startup world in Nigeria. What inspired you to make that change, and what's been the best part of that change for you?
Hi, Miles. Yes, thank you firstly for having me. And just to answer your question, the short answer is actually love. My husband moved back sort of a few months back, and I had no interest in trying to do the long distance thing, so I packed my bags and followed him. But to be honest, the real context behind it was that we had come to a point where we were sort of evaluating our skills, our experiences. We were evaluating, sort of everything that we had done to date, and then we were searching for an environment that would allow us to make the most impact. And it made sense to do that, not exactly in the city of London, but back home where we were from. So we came in, and for me, the tech startup scene, again, when you're searching for that impact, and a lot of the panelists today have spoken around, this ability to create, one personal change, but potentially even systematic change, change that would take years and would take committees and governments and big corporates and all of that. And we're able to use tech to really quickly change the way people live their lives. And that for me has just always been so exciting. So that's sort of what brought me sort of here. And in terms of, the best part, I think, I said it's very sort of personal. It's a very sort of personal impact to us in the way that we live our lives. So for each of these businesses, they personally affect the way that we live. My journey with Baby Bliss really started, when I had my first baby, and I had a lot of my friends, a lot of my contemporaries. What we do is when you get pregnant, you book a flight and you pack up a bag and you basically plan to be out of the country for a few months. And that's so disruptive in family life. That's so disruptive in work. That's so disruptive in everything that concerns you. But that was the way that we got around the concerns around sort of maternal health. That's the way we got around concerns around finding the right products and services. And to be clear, that was my plan. I had booked my ticket, but my doctor kept making me move it because I was having a very difficult pregnancy. And I had moved it to one date, and probably about 10 days before that, my daughter turned up. And so I was completely unprepared. She turned up 10 weeks early. I was completely unprepared for my journey here. And I had to basically leave her in intensive care and literally enter the market and begin this mad scramble to try and find everything I need. And it really just brought to light just how stressful this could be. Sort of in other climes, this is an exciting time. It's kind of akin to getting married. You're planning, you're trying out car seats, you're trying out strollers, you're matching those products for your lifestyle. But in our reality, it was just stress, and you're dealing with pressures around authenticity of the products. You're dealing with affordability. You're dealing with just even access, and beyond the products, even to the kind of services that you need. And so really getting connected with the team at Baby Bliss and really seeing that there is a potential to create this universe that helps us to, one, just source products. So we have local brands, we have international brands. All our products are authentic. I think probably about 60% or so of the products on the open markets are counterfeits. So our products are sourced and authentic, and we hold ourselves to a higher standard from that. And then our products are also I guess they're desired by our community. So that's sort of the other element of our business. So, beyond the retail business, we've spent a lot of time building active communities with our moms. So we're able to really understand what they need and make sure that they have that product accessible in a very, very easy to get manner. You shouldn't have to sort of approach pregnancy like a project manager where you have, Excel spreadsheets and you're shipping things from different countries, and, it's just not what it needs to be. So we're able to work sort of within our communities to bring in products. And like Sabrina said, we're selling a lot of the tech startups. We need to be nimble in the way that we sell. So we have the stores, we have e-commerce, we have social commerce. Where the customer is, we're basically following them in whatever way makes their lives easier. And then more excitingly for us, we're also looking beyond the products part of it to actually services. So actually partnering with hospitals that we know from our community have, the right kind of standards and, are able to provide the kind of experience that our moms would like to experience. So they don't need to spend all that money going abroad. We can find you a reasonable hospital here that will treat you in the way that you need to be treated, and will ensure that your baby's life and your life is held to the highest standards. And then, we're also working on all sorts of sort of exciting packages packages from like, antenatal packages to, insurance packages, and just really looking at this, it always seems so straightforward. I'm going to have a baby, and then you have the baby, and then you realize actually, for me, it was literally like, what have I done? So it's such a I'm trying to not use the word terrorizing, but it's such a dramatic change for women that it's great to be able to create this universe sort of around them that sort of walks with them and is an integral part of their journey. And, as a result, I'm really excited about sort of the difference that's going to make going forward. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Toyin. And that was the story, the founding stories of all of our panelists. As you've heard many of them trying to address and find solutions to the challenges they themselves encountered. I'm going to move on to questions now, and I see the first one coming through for all of the founders. It says, the first investment is often the hardest funding to raise. When you initially started your company, how did you first start sourcing funding?
Can any of us jump in?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Go for it, Sabrina.
My experience was reaching out to personal networks first. So kind of established what we needed to do, and then went out to other entrepreneurs, went out to people who had been advisors to us in our business, and it kind of spread from there. I think it was very important for other founders to be able to share their networks of investors, other advisors to be able to share their networks of investors, both on the continent and off of. At the same time, it's a bit scary because you do feel like you're very limited in who you have access to. It's like, oh my gosh, it's only my network. But then you start to see how it spreads across other people's. So that was our experience from the beginning. It was very much friends and family, and that network of people who could see what type of entrepreneurs we were, because I truly believe this now, kind of looking back, the business almost doesn't matter at the very beginning. It's really an investment in the person, and do they have the grit and the tenacity and the dedication and the belief that they're going to be able to execute and keep this business going and growing.
Absolutely. So it's all about the trust in the individual rather than in the idea of the business. Anyone else like to jump in?
Sure. And I think another thing that a lot of people want to look at is, do you have skin in the game? So for me, at Life Bank, I'd actually invested. I believe so much I was so committed to the idea and believed it so much that I'd put my entire life saving in the idea and in the business before I actually went out to find investors. And for me, I think that when you're untested and when the idea is not something that there is a very easy, comparison across your market or even outside the market, then it is important for you to have validated the idea and validated your market. And often the way that you do that, particularly when you're a woman, a lot of people are not willing to sort of like take a bet on. The way to do that is by sort of like putting some skin in the game yourself.
Absolutely.
A slightly different pathway, if I may. So in the beginning, we started as students, and we were a year in before we really started working full time. And at least in the US, I think there's a number of opportunities for students that are available. And so we were able to apply for business plan competitions and grants and all sorts of things that allowed us to get to the stage of validation and get to the stage of investment readiness. I think if you are able to tap into some of those networks, especially for very capital upfront type business like a medical device company, we were able to leverage a lot of those grants into the networks from our university, from other competitions that were available to really jumpstart and get to a point of our MVP or some kind of prototype that we were able to start demonstrating the utility and the accuracy of the product, really, safety, accuracy. once we started getting more and more involved and really started developing more of the business case around it, that's when we started bringing on investors, because the impact of our system is tremendous, but we also have to have a business case. You can't just put things out there. Sustainability is such an important aspect of everything that we do in Africa. And globally, but specifically in our context, I think sustainability is such an important piece that if you don't have the acumen, if you don't have the business side of it nailed down, your impact will be minimal. So both of those, at least in our model, go hand in hand. And that's where we really value both grants and investment and continue to seek both avenues of funding.
Thank you, Sona. And I'm seeing a note that that's all we have time for today. So in closing, I'd like to say thank you to our panel of phenomenal female tech founders for making the time to be here. Tell us about your companies that are bringing such innovative solutions to cater to the needs of consumers and businesses on the continent. Thank you so much. And also a big thank you to Prosper Africa for hosting the panel and for all that you are doing to increase two-way trade and investment between the United States and Africa. To all of you on the line, if you're keen to find out more about any of the companies featured here today, you would have already received an Investing in Africa's Women Tech Founders and Portfolio Managers Company Deal Book. If you've not, please check your spam folders. Anyone who registered after midnight last night, we'll be getting that to you shortly. So take a look at the deal book for more information on our panelists, or you can register your interest on the Prosper Africa virtual deal room, and a member of the deal team will connect you directly with those companies. Thank you so much. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you very much, Marls and all. I guess it's a good sign to end a conversation, wanting it to continue, wanting to hear so much more. Thank you to our panelists. I hope we do have some good ways for all of us who want to continue this conversation together. As Marls mentioned, there is a deal book that most folks, I think, were already sent. It is also available on the Prosper Africa website, our new website at ProsperAfrica.gov, and we'll make sure to share that link as well so that you can access it. And look forward to keeping the conversation going as we move into our next panel, a short one here at the end of our event. I know some folks need to transition off the call and we have some other folks joining, so please go ahead and do that now. And then I do hope most folks will stay on as we continue our conversation with a focus on gender lens investing. And to get that started, it's really just my sheer pleasure to be joined by Soraya Darabi, who is general partner and founder for TMB. Welcome, Soraya.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. I can't wait to chat. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions, Soraya. We've got about 10 minutes together, and then we'll open up the conversation more widely. So Please. To start us off, great, fantastic. Hoping you can just tell us a bit about yourself, about your work with TMB, and to the company's commitment to making investments, I think, as you say, that reflect the way the world actually looks.
With pleasure. TMV is our firm. It stands for Trail Mix Ventures. We've been in existence for 6 years. TMV invests, as you just put it, in the way the world truly looks. And we link to census data on our website in a tongue-in-cheek way when we say that. 77% of our portfolio founders from Fund 1 were women and or minorities. 65% of the founders from Fund 1 were women, and that just happened to be the case. Our team is equally at our firm represented by men and women, and we have a diverse body of people working with us. And so by virtue of that, the deals that come to us look equally diverse in nature. And this is not just the composite of who the founders are on the origination team. It also represents whom they're hiring and what their cap tables look like. For us, diversity isn't just about optics or checking off a box. It's about creating culture, and it's about diversifying the landscape of technology to make it accessible and equitable for all. And so you'd think, given how I just said that would be our thesis for the fund, but we're actually not diversity specific investors. In fact, we invest in financial technology, tech-enabled sustainable solutions, the future of work, the care economy, which includes healthcare, childcare, elder care, and mobility and sustainability. And within those 5 categories, we think diversity is simply table stakes.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I think probably for most of us on the line, we could all agree that that's the right thing to do. But I'm hoping you could talk about a bit more. I'm understanding from a returns perspective, from an investment perspective, it's also proving to be the smart thing to do. So could you talk a bit about some lessons learned along the way and key takeaways there?
I'm very fortunate that our team has had 10 demonstrable exits. Most recently, 2 weeks ago, we celebrated the IPO of a company called Figs, very comfortable medical apparel, founded by 2 women, and it's intersectional diversity on the founding team as well. What's really remarkable about Figs, when we met them back in 2016, they were trying to build a care economy business, a healthcare business to make scrubs accessible in terms of price point and comfortable for all healthcare workers. This, of course, was pre-pandemic. And as a result, we agreed with these 2 founders and were able to invest in their earliest institutional financing. We helped value the company at 15 million. When they went public at a $6.8 billion market cap, which was about 30% above projections, according to CNBC. That's one example. Another example in Fund 1 is a healthcare company called City Block Health, founded by Dr. Toyin Awesu, among 3 other founders. Toyin is from Kenya, and she's also lived in Sierra Leone. She's a doctor by trade, and she is one of only 2 Black women in the world to now be at the helm of a unicorn. City Block Health is valued in the many billions. I can't give the exact number. What they do is they provide accessible healthcare for low-income Americans, and they partner with payers to make that happen. It's a remarkable business. It's altruistic, but it's profitable. And it was conceived by one of the smartest founders that we've ever met, who happens to be from Africa, which is why I'm bringing her up on today's call. So with that in mind, using those 2 examples, unicorns multiple times over, it just makes sense from a financial perspective to invest in women, to invest in diversity. And we're so proud to be doing that multiple times over at TMV.
That's fantastic. That was really interesting. So I understand, Soraya, that you have experience not just on the investor side, but also as a startup as well. And so I'm sure you identify with many of the folks we've heard from already today. I think there's a lot of folks joining today as well who also are entrepreneurs and work in the tech space and startups. I'm wondering what kind of advice you have to offer, having seen this from both sides of the picture.
Well, I was just listening to Toyin speak about her harrowing journey becoming a mother, and I have a lot of compassion for that because I too was fundraising last year while very pregnant and a high-risk pregnancy at that. So I'm very curious to hear more about what she's building. But I think it's that word, compassion. You know, all of the partners, there are 5 of us at TMV, have been founders before. We have operational expertise. We've had some successes, 7 exits between us, including an IPO. But we've also had our fair share of false starts and plateaus. I refuse to use the word failure. Plateaus are really common in the startup universe. And, you know, when you think about whom you want to be on your founding team as investors, you know, remember it's a 2-way pitch and you get to choose them as much as they choose you. I would assume, and I'm biased, but having been on both sides of the table, I would assume you'd want someone that has been in your shoes before, because not only can they bring that financial lens to the table and a network that you hope to be unparalleled, but they can also bring a sense of compassion, empathy for what you're going through. And it's an emotional roller coaster starting a startup, to be very honest. There are highs and lows and a million pivots that you pretend were always intentional all along. An investor who understands that's been in your shoes, is more likely to pivot with you and to trust you to have the best judgment to navigate your company forward. And remember, I always say those growth round firms with the blue chip pedigree, they're going to be there at your next round for Series A, B, C, and beyond. Telling them no in the seed round just gives them FOMO. So instead, be highly selective and intentional with the folks that you partner with, specifically in those first 18 to 24 months of infancy. That's what I would say.
That really flips the script in some ways, often thinking about businesses trying to get an investor, but actually to be choosy about who that investor is makes so much sense the way you put it. You mentioned earlier, Soraya, an example of a founder who's from Africa that your company is invested in. How are you looking at opportunities across the African continent? Where are you seeing opportunity? What's most exciting to you in that space?
Well, I'm very proud to be receiving deal flow from the best fund managers I know in Africa, and I'd love to give a little shout out to them. Whether it's Beyond Capital Ventures, a woman-led emerging markets fund dedicated to seed and Series A in Africa, Arua Capital Management, which is one of the few Black-led, women-owned funds in growth equity with a gender lens in Africa. Unicorn Growth Capital, which is driving the future of fintech in the region. It's a $50 million Africa-focused fintech fund, investing in transformative founders. Or Ingressive Capital out of Nigeria, one of the few active pre-seed and seed stage VCs in the region that leverages their global network to assist with growth and scale. Those are 4 funds that I share deal flow with, and I'm very willingly, because we're all part of a group called Transact Global. Website's transactglobal.co. It's a group that I co-founded with 4 friends back in 2018 to provide a global network of women-led funds that share in global deal flow with one another. And certainly I'm excited to invest in the region. Help me pull the trigger, send me all the deal flow you can in the 5 areas in which we invest. But I wanted to shine a light on those 4 firms in particular, because I think they have the best eyes and ears on the ground.
One last question for you, Soraya, before we open up the discussion. Certainly for so many of us, the world has just turned upside down over the past 12 to 18 months, and a lot has changed. And for many now, we're kind of crawling back out of these holes as we look at what a post-COVID environment could be. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the lasting impact of these months as we slowly emerge, and also if there is anything that you hope doesn't go back to the way it was before.
Well, I think, certainly the pandemic was, the Black Mirror experience that none of us wanted to experience. And then we did, and we thought, is this reality? And coming out of it, I think folks are really shell-shocked in many ways, and trying to adapt to a new normal, not really remembering in terms of muscle memory what the former normal looked like. From a venture perspective, however, the pandemic simply accelerated trends that we saw long coming for the past decade. Now, I've been investing in the future of work for my entire career, and I could have, belabored the point back when the 2010 census came out that women would be 51% of the workforce by 2020, and we were in January 2021 in the US. Of course, then we were demolished and pushed out of the workforce because of the pandemic. So that work to get there, to become the majority, was very short-lived. Within 3 months, we were no longer the majority. Or we could have talked to you about the 1099 economy and how it was quadrupling pre-pandemic, because people wanted flex work and to work from anywhere, or at least to work from home, where I'm calling you from today, even though we have an office in Manhattan at TMV. And of course, the pandemic simply accelerated that. In Fold, we reached 54% about 4 years earlier than expected, because more folks, were not returning to the office and choosing to communicate like this over Zoom or video meet. So if anything, it's almost like we got a crash course in convergence and digitization. And now it's a question of combining that crash course with ethics. We have digital availability at our fingertips. The world is globalized. We can communicate with our friends in Africa. I have a call this evening at 5 o'clock with Australia. It's just dead simple to do so. There's no longer that hurdle mentally to get over, to think about, your friends in Australia being just a quick Zoom away. With the removal of that hurdle, what does that mean for finance and for investing and for equality? I certainly hope it just means there's a more equitable future for us all now that capital is available and honestly quite frothy. And there's more conversation than ever that it's important to invest in diversity for great returns. My wish, my cautious optimism is that the pandemic was actually a blessing in disguise, and we are going to see equality form from the globalization that has occurred.
Thank you, Soraya. I share that optimism as well, and recognize that these shifts in digitization, the changing in how we convene, are precisely how we're all able to gather here today. So I suppose that is a silver lining. I'd be remiss if I didn't encourage you, Soraya, the funds you mentioned, and the other investors on the line to please register for the Prosper Africa virtual deal room. Check out these investment opportunities we've already discussed in the first half of today's session and more. And thank you very much for being here with us today. And we'll open up the discussion now to an even wider group. Thanks again, Soraya.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Stephen.
And now I will turn over to Toyin Awesu, who's communications advisor with me on the Prosper Africa team, to introduce our next panel. Over to you, Toyin.
Great, good morning. Hello, everyone. And as Nina mentioned, I'm Toyin Awesu, and we are now going to turn our discussion over to the other side of the deal-making process, and that is over to portfolio and fund managers who play a critical role in how funds are raised in a portfolio, but also how they're invested, including investment strategy of a fund. And so right now, I would like to open this discussion up to our two speakers, and they'll talk a bit about the work that they're doing as well. So first, we have Mo Odele, tech and startup lawyer from Vazi Legal. We also have Lelemba Firi, principal from Enigma Ventures and Africa Trust Group. So thank you, ladies, for joining us this morning, afternoon. And I'd like to just first start off with asking you to briefly introduce yourself and the organization in which you work for, and what you have been up to there.
Okay, I'm happy to go first. Thank you so much, Toyin. My name is Mo Odele, and I'm a partner at Vazi Legal. Vazi Legal is one of the few law firms in Africa that is specifically focused on the tech industry. All our clients are either, well, tech and innovation space. So all our clients are either founders or people who invest in founders or people who partner with founders at some point. I'm also an angel investor personally, and then I also am a partner at a VC fund. It's a VC fund that is focused on impact-driven businesses, and we're mostly focused on Africans in the diaspora and Africans within the continent that are driving change in sectors such as education, access to finance. And it's called Tip of Africa. So Vazi Legal is really where I really play a very strong role, I would say, in the tech space. And from where we sit, you can see what the participation in the tech space looks like, because over 90% of our clients are male, even if we're an all-female law firm. So it's just basically symptomatic of the fact that because of the kind of work we do, we focus only on people who are raising money or people who are investing. You know what I mean? So by then, we're sort of like a will I say a direct, like our client base is really a direct, I would say, reflection of what the industry looks like. So so we also, I personally am qualified in the US as well as Nigeria. So my partner is qualified in, dually qualified as well. So we provide legal advisory mostly for a lot of startups who are looking to expand to the US. African startups, focused startups who are looking to expand to the US, and US investors who are also looking to invest in Africa. So we kind of like straddle that middle point. So that's really the introduction about what I do.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you for that introduction. So Lelemba, I'd like to turn over to you. Can you tell us a bit more about your work over at Enigma Ventures and also Africa Trust Group?
Thank you. So hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on. So I'm Lelemba Firi. I'm based in Cape Town, and I'm the principal for Africa Trust Group and Enigma Ventures. My own background is very varied. I've worked in government, I've worked in large corporate, and then grew a startup as an entrepreneur from 1 market to 5 markets, raised financing through that process, and eventually exited. And one of the things that kept on bugging me was how few women were on the same platforms that I was on, or even in the portfolios for our investors. Very few were getting to the stage where they could raise a Series A, let alone a Series B. And so getting into the investment space, what was important for me was setting up a funds management firm that focuses solely on gender lens investing. And so we have 3 funds that we manage. or at that early stage of investing. So we look at pre-seed, we look at pre-seed, and we also look at that seed capital stage. And so for us, it's really about really increasing that pipeline of women who are getting access to financing in the early stages so that we get to see more get into a place where they can actually scale and get access to Series A, B, and C. The gap in access to finance for women entrepreneurs on this continent is seen at any stage of this financing cycle, right out from the very setting up phase where women are leaving their employment with less salaries and so less disposable income to put into their businesses. They have fewer networks. And so even when you say things like go to your family and friends, their family and friends and their own personal networks might have less disposable income as well. And so working at that earlier phase for us was where we saw our gap. We invest across the 16 countries in the SADC region, which is the southern part of Africa. And we launched our fund right before the pandemic. And so all of our investments were done during the pandemic. And since then, we've deployed just over $3.7 million into about 16 businesses. And it's an exciting space for us to be in. And we don't ascribe to the messaging that there just isn't a good enough pipeline. What we believe is that the women are there, and it's really up to us to go out there and find them. And that's what we've been doing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for those brief introductions. So data has proven that there are more female entrepreneurs in Africa than there are in any other continent. African women are more likely than African men to start a business. But despite this, the gap in funding for women-led businesses is still pretty wide in Africa. Based on your experience and also just general from your own thinking, what are some practical steps do you think that needs to happen to help close this gap?
I can start with that one. So I think part of the issue is both on the supply side, but also on the demand side. On the supply side, there's typical biases that you would expect related to gender and race, and women being seen to be a lot more riskier investments than men. We see this in so many studies, and when you go out into the market, you can see that this is the same issue where women are asked not to lose money when an investor is looking at them, whilst men are asked more questions that are focused on how big is your opportunity and how exciting and large could it get. And so there are obvious biases that we have to get over. Secondly, is the fact that mostly on the capital allocation front, we have more male investors, and research just points to the fact that people are more likely to invest in people who look like themselves because their own networks are going to be predominantly male. The people that they've gone to school with are going to be predominantly male. And so part of the thing that we're seeing is becoming important is to have a lot more female fund managers getting into the space, but by whatever means, whether through acceleration programs or launching their own funds. And this is really exciting because even just over the last year, we have seen so many more female led funds coming up, but there's still a challenge with them raising their own first few funds, with LPs still having these same biases. And thirdly, on the supply side is the fact that a lot of investment is particularly focused in tech and doesn't want to look across other sectors where women might be doing really well and might be growing businesses that are scalable. And so shifting this thinking to understanding that whatever industry women might be in, there is always the possibility to leverage tech and to apply a tech layer into any business and any industry, and not just be focused on the more popular tech industries such as fintech. On the demand side, there's definitely an educational gap that we're seeing from women entrepreneurs, just not being clear about what it is that investors want or what type of financing to access for the needs that they might have in their businesses. And so there is definitely a need on the demand side for a lot more education, a bit more hand-holding, but this is typical across all industries and with many SMEs, whether women-led or male-led. But there is this need to really invest in that education piece to just bridge the languages between what the entrepreneurs are speaking and the investors are speaking.
Thank you. And I'm going to come back to one of the points that you made about, a lot of the laser focus being in fintech. And so I'll come back to that and get your thoughts around that. But Mo, if you could also just highlight, what what kind of solutions do you think we need to be looking at, or should be looked at to help close this gap on the continent?
Yeah, I also would echo the thought around pattern recognition. So it's like people would say when they want to invest in a company, they already have a bias as to what a founder should look like, right? So a lot of what a founder should look like, and then a lot of the adjectives that people would use to describe what an ideal founder is not the kind of adjectives that we know that people would, typically describe women as. And this is just general society bias, just seeping into the investment landscape, right? But I'm going to push back a bit on the educational part, because I feel like that's also adding to the bias that women founders, for some funny reason, have to be a lot more educated than male founders. The ignorance is equal across board, to be honest. And I don't think that male founders generally have a lot more exposure in terms of what investors are looking for. And why do I say this? I've been providing legal advisory for tech founders for 10 years. And in those 10 years, I've dealt mostly with men. And they're just as ignorant as everybody else, right? So there's a lot of focus for women where instead of us putting out the money into her business, we're putting out the money into capacity building. I'm not saying that capacity building is not important, but I think it comes from this bias of a mindset that women, for some funny reason, because they are women, they have to be more educated. There's a lot more educational gap. I don't think so. I think, founders generally, especially first-time founders, are equally ignorant about certain things that they should be, right? So just really shifting that focus away. And a lot of first-time founders, they don't get to know what a term sheet is until they start raising funds, right? So it's the same thing. I feel like the same leeway that we give to male founders, where we say they can learn on the job, we should also give it to female founders as well. A lot of accelerator programs and programs and resources that you see that are directed at female founders, it's all education, 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 and no money, right? Give her the same privilege where she can learn on the job as well. So that's what I think. I really wanted to emphasize that, because I think that's also one of the things that stops women founders from being able to access capital.
Thank you. Very, very valid points. And, I want to go into our next question, also looking at, the time that we have, but we'll keep on with this conversation because I think this is really important. You mentioned, Lelemba, a lot of the focus being in the tech sector. And so while I do think that that's a growing sector and there's a lot of attraction there, like you mentioned, there are other areas that there are rising opportunities. So I'd just love to hear from you, from your experience and your perspective, both of you actually. What are some other sectors do you see rising opportunities for women entrepreneurs?
So I think the education space is looking pretty exciting, and we're seeing so many more opportunities for technology being levered in education. If there's anything that the pandemic showed us, is how inequality just zips through at all levels, starting from, if you're coming from a low-income family, when schools had to be shut down, other kids who were coming from upper-income communities would just go online. The switch was almost seamless, whereas lower-income families were just having challenges around that. School was just shut down. That's it. There was no other option. And so we've seen interesting models coming up that are supporting education at different income levels. A lot of them are leveraging technology and finding unique ways for making technology a lot more accessible, and that's focused on education. There's exciting stuff coming up in medicine, particularly med tech, whereas, traditionally, we all wanted to just go and rock up at the doctor's office. Now we're seeing a lot more, willingness to just call in and have, Zoom calls with your doctor rather than walking into the hospitals. And still the products and services space, where we do find a lot of women, is growing and very exciting. And now what we're seeing more is around how do we, make distribution a lot more easier. And some of the models like Sabrina's one, where they're creating a bit of a marketplace for, for artisans and other people that create products, have come in super handy, because now we're getting central marketplaces and e-commerce platforms that are focusing on women who are dealing with particular products and services who might not have been able to come online before. And so all of this is exciting. And it's been so good to see that one of the upsides of the pandemic has been the fact that digitization has sped up other industries that were typically traditional, and a lot more openness for people, both on the entrepreneur side, but also on the consumer side, to get online, because we really didn't have much of a choice. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lemba. Those were some really really interesting sectors that you mentioned, and also, we're seeing a lot of that play out right in front of us. So Mo, I know you have your lots of experience in the fintech space, but looking outside of that, what other areas in terms of rising opportunities are you seeing for female entrepreneurs?
I'll definitely agree with education, especially for, you see a lot of women in the educational space. One space I'm really excited about is the creator economy. So technology that generally helps the creator economy is something that you see a lot of women participating in. And I really want to emphasize that now there's this wave around the world where even investors around the world are beginning to see opportunities in the creative space. But when we're still working on a white paper on this. But so far from our research, we found out that people who are raising money in the creator economy, an economy that is a sub-economy that has really been driven by mostly women, are not women, right? So the people who are raising money in that sector as of today are not women. So even if women are the ones who are, majority of the players in that sector. So I think that this is something where we're going to have another case of, as soon as a particular industry becomes attractive, then the women are kicked out. So I really want fund managers who are looking at the creator economy to look specifically for female founders, because it's definitely not a pipeline problem. There's so many women who understand the creator economy. So, before it gets really flashy and all of that, look for female founders. They're out there. So I think those are two sectors I see a lot of women have some stronghold on there. Then sectors that also are historically service-based that are now looking to, to layer on technology. So that's another sector where you see a lot of women players as well. So say like an accounting platform or a legal tech platform, something like that. So really taking something that used to be a service or a service-oriented and turning it into an automated platform. I'm really not sure what that particular industry is called, but we've seen a lot of women. It's probably just, service-based, but we've seen a lot of women entrepreneurs in that sector as well.
Thank you. So I'm gonna go over to our Q&A, because we have two really good questions that I'd love to ask you all, also, factoring in our time right now. So the first question is for Lelemba. What are the investment criteria for your fund to invest in female-founded startups?
Yeah, so the business has to either be majority women-owned or women-led, and or must have products and services that are benefiting women. And so when we say majority women-owned, it can't just be, window dressing. We really want to ensure that the female entrepreneur, the female founder, does have some strategic say and sway in how the growth in the business happens and in the decision-making. That's number one. Number two, the business or idea has to be scalable. We're still in the venture capital space. And even with our innovative fund, our aim is to grow them to a place where they can get an equity investment. And so it has to be scalable so that we have opportunities to exit further down the line. And number three, it has to be operational in Africa. And solving African problems. And whilst we are okay for the products or services to be exportable internationally and worldwide, operationally, we want to be investing in Africa. And so that's what we look like.
Thank you. we have another question for Mo. What are some of the key factors that investors look for in pre-seed companies?
Okay, so I'm going to assume that we're looking at investors who are investing in Africa, right? So I'll use that context. Okay. So for a lot of people who are investing in Africa, a lot of investors understand the fact that we don't have access to excess capital, like say Silicon Valley, for instance. So a lot of investors really want to see a pathway to profitability. So I'm not saying that you need to be profitable. A lot of people think before they speak to investors, they have to be profitable. No, not necessarily. I mean, if you're profitable, that gives you a lot more, gives you a lot more leverage. But if you're not, you should have a pathway to profitability that you can defend. So another thing people also look out for is, as everybody already knows, is the team. So even if you are a solo founder, one of the things that you should also, when you are trying to pitch to investors, is let the investors know that you don't intend to be, or even if you intend to be a solo founder, let them understand why you can pull this off as a solo founder. And if you can't pull it off as a solo founder, let them understand the kind of people you want to get on board. Because it also tells the investor that you have a vision for this business that is bigger than you, right? And then the third thing is you need to also make sure that because I'm a lawyer, I'm going to talk from this perspective, that you have your legal data room in order. What do I mean by that? We don't like to talk about structure and legals and all of that, but it really makes it will really be helpful for you before you have a conversation with an investor for you to speak with a lawyer. Now, I'm not saying just speak to a lawyer that is your friend, who does like real estate or something like that. Speak to a lawyer who has experience in the startup ecosystem, because you also want to get into that conversation informed, right? Know that finally, your VC and yourself, your investor and yourself are on the same side. VCs don't go about trying to, stifle people, because at the end of the day, if the company doesn't grow, then their investment doesn't grow. So don't go into that conversation with an antagonistic mindset, because it's not, right? It's a partnership. So I think just, having those things in mind would help you have a better conversation with your prospective investor.
Thank you. And so there was also another question. Someone asked about what support and training is available to female founders to help bridge the funding gap. I would like to encourage the person who asked the question to visit ProsperAfrica.gov to learn more about the different tools and resources that are available through the U.S. government. And hopefully we can help you out in this journey. So as we wrap up, I just want to ask one final question to each of you. Now, I know you all have been working in this space, and I'm sure there's an element of advocacy as well in the work that you do. And so I just want to know, what's your pitch to other members of your team or other people in the sector who simply just don't see the importance of gender lens investing? What's your pitch? How do you get them on board?
Mo, do you
I'll go to you first.
Okay. Okay. So internally, there's no option. If you're part of my firm, you're investing in women. So internally, there's really no option. So when you're getting in board, that's what you're signing up for. But for people in the industry, I think we're past making the business case for why it's important to invest in women entrepreneurs. We are, sidelining half of the population. We have more women entrepreneurs on the continent. On an annual basis, Africa loses up to $95 billion by not economically involving women, in our industries. And so all of this compounds, not just at national level, wherever you would be investing in or in your region, but for the whole continent. And so it's a no-brainer, and the returns are consistently being found that with teams that have diverse founders, which includes both men and women, people of different races, and so forth, the returns are way better. So from a money perspective, you're losing money as well. And so let's just not think about it from that impact perspective, because I know that a lot of LPs particularly and GPs are interested in the return. So you are losing money by neglecting so many industries that have got huge potential for scale and huge potential for giving you great exits. So get into the game. You're missing out.
Great pitch. Mo, what is your pitch?
Yeah, my pitch is pretty much the same. I always tell them, look at the numbers don't lie, right? Except you make them to. So it's always, see, look at the numbers, right? When you look at the numbers, you will see that nobody needs to tell you, you need to invest in this business because the numbers just tell you that you should. And then when you also focus on the numbers, it also adds as an antidote, if you will, to the bias that most investors have towards female investors. Interestingly, as an interesting story, I have one of my clients who is an investor and one of the speakers on the last panel, right? And then I sent him a message. I was like, oh, look at your investee. And then he was like, oh, what company is this? And I was like, wait, you don't even know you don't recognize her? And he's like, yeah, I don't know what she looks like. This is the first time, I'm actually saying, what she looks like. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I remember when we were doing that deal, it was just about the numbers, right? We looked at the numbers made sense for the investor, and it was like, hey, let's do it. And I think that really just focusing on that would probably help us get to a point where people actually just invest in businesses because they're good businesses, right? And nothing more. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's definitely where we are, we're striving towards. And I think, making these deliberate steps is very important to help us get there. So I want to turn it over back to my colleague, Nina Prieur, to close us out. And Lalemba and Mo, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I've definitely learned so much more after speaking with you both.
Thank you, Toyin. Thank you all. Not a big closing for me today, just mostly a thank you to everyone for participating and a sincere desire and commitment to continue the conversation with all who want to. I would encourage you to, again, check out the Prosper Africa virtual deal room for our investors to register, businesses who are interested in being featured to reach out to us via email. You can access that through the direct link we send in the chat, but also on our new website at ProsperAfrica.gov. On that new website, you'll also find an event page for today's event where you can access the deal book with more information about the companies featured, as well as very soon a recording of today's event if you missed anything or want to share the conversation. I'd also encourage you to continue the conversation with us on social. We're using the hashtag ProsperAfrica Virtual Deal Room to expand out this conversation to new networks. And please also follow and tag us at Prosper Africa US. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook and eager to engage. This is the first event in a longer series we are doing and planning. So also look for information on our next event on investing in African ICT markets on July 15th. Details coming soon. Looking forward to seeing you all in those various channels. And in the meantime, take care all. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.